want to tell you something I've never told anyone. The morning Richard Calloway found out I owned his building, I was in my car, in the parking garage, 3rd level, eating a granola bar over my steering wheel. Not glamorous. I had been up since 4 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, and my apartment radiator was making that sound again. The one that goes clunk, clunk, hiss, every 40 seconds, all night long. So there I was, granola bar, bad sleep, 3rd floor parking garage, when my phone rang. Thomas Waverly, my attorney. Claire, he called. Richard Calloway called. I took another bite of my granola bar. What did he say? He said, and I'm quoting, "Is this some kind of joke?" I looked at the concrete wall in front of my car. What did you tell him? I told him Ms. Donovan would be happy to discuss the lease terms at her convenience. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that sneaks up on you when you're exhausted, and slightly in disbelief that something you planned for 2 years actually worked. Transfer him through, Thomas. This is that story. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I drive a 2019 Honda Civic with a cracked rear bumper I keep meaning to fix. I tell you that because I want you to understand who I actually am. Not the version that sounds impressive in retrospect, the actual version. My dad worked at the Westfield manufacturing plant on Route 40 for 19 years. They closed it on a Tuesday in October. I was 12. He found out when he drove to work and there was a padlock on the gate and a paper notice taped to the chain link fence. 19 years. A paper notice on a chain link fence. My mom started cleaning office buildings at night 6 weeks later. She'd come home at 2 a.m. sometimes smelling like industrial floor cleaner, and she'd still make sure my lunch was packed for the next morning. I watched her do that for 4 years. I never forgot it. Not once. So when I graduated and got my real estate license, and eventually walked into Calloway and Associates, I wasn't trying to prove something to Richard Calloway. I was trying to make sure my parents' story didn't become mine. That's different. And that difference is what Richard never understood about me. Not once. In 4 years. Okay, so here's where I need to be really honest with you. Because looking back now, it's easy to make myself sound like I had everything figured out. I didn't. Year 1 at Calloway. I loved it. Genuinely. I was good at the work. The work was interesting. And Richard, at first, seemed like exactly the kind of mentor I had been looking for. He took me to 2 client meetings in my first month, introduced me as our most promising new agent. I went home those nights genuinely excited. I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I think this is it. I think this is the place." She said, "Don't get ahead of yourself, baby." Moms. She was right. By month 4, the introductions stopped. By month 8, Derek Morrison had arrived. Richard's college roommate's son, 26 years old. Nice enough guy, honestly. Not malicious, just deeply, profoundly, almost impressively mediocre at the actual job. In 18 months, Derek closed 4 deals. I closed 23. Derek got full bonuses every quarter. My bonuses were always delayed, under review, being restructured, coming next quarter. I asked Richard about it directly, exactly once. Sat in his office, professional, calm. My numbers printed out on 2 sheets of paper in front of him. He looked at the numbers, looked at me. "Claire, I hear you. Let me look into this and get back to you." He never got back to me. I did not ask again. Because that night, I drove home and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for 20 minutes before going inside. And I made a decision. I was going to stop waiting for Richard Calloway to see me, and I was going to build something he couldn't ignore. Before I keep going, have you ever had a moment where you realized someone at work was never going to actually see you. Not overlook you accidentally, but deliberately, systematically. Drop a 1 if you have. Drop a 2 if you haven't, but you've watched it happen to someone else. Because that moment in my car changed everything about what I did next. I want to be clear about something. What I did next was not brilliant. It was just consistent. And I think that's actually more important. I started buying commercial property. Not because I had some master plan. Honestly, it started because my cousin Marcus called me one Sunday about a retail space he'd seen listed in Franklinton, a neighborhood on the west side of Columbus that everyone in my office referred to as not quite there yet. Claire, you should look at this thing. It's going for $180,000. Seems low. I almost didn't go. I had laundry to do. I remember that specifically. I had laundry sitting in a basket by my bedroom door, and I almost said, Marcus, maybe next week. Instead, I drove out there on a Sunday afternoon in February. Cold, gray. One of those Columbus Februaries that feels personal. The space was rough. Previous tenant had been a dry cleaner. There was still equipment bolted to the floor. The ceiling had a water stain in the back left corner, shaped vaguely like the state of Florida. And I stood there in my winter coat with my hands in my pockets, and I looked at that Florida-shaped water stain, and I thought, this neighborhood is 18 months away from being somewhere people want to be. I had been watching the development permits, the new rail stop 2 blocks east, the coffee shop that had just signed a lease on the corner. These things matter. I bought it. $180,000. Spent $43,000 renovating. Leased all 3 units in under 5 months. And then I did it again. And again. Every bonus Richard delayed went into property. Every commission Derek got credit for went into property. Every quiet fury I swallowed on the drive home went into property. Property 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. By the time Richard Calloway had his name on the door of our firm, I had a portfolio worth $3.8 million that he knew absolutely nothing about. And then I saw the listing. 847 Commerce Street. Our building. My building. I just didn't know it yet.
Gerald Hutchins had owned that building for 31 years. 71 years old. Ready to be done. We met for coffee 3 times. Third time, he looked at me across the table at Brennan's Cafe on 5th Street, and he said something I think about almost every day now. Ms. Donovan, I've sold 2 buildings in my life. Both times, I sold to the wrong person. I could tell by the way they talked about the tenants, like problems to manage. You talk about them like people. I want this one to go right. I signed the papers on a Thursday. 8 days later, Richard walked into my office. March 14th, my 34th birthday. I had completely forgotten it was my birthday. Honestly, I had a 9 a.m. client call and I was running 7 minutes late, and I had spilled oat milk on my sleeve getting out of the car, and I was just... It was that kind of morning. Richard knocked, which he never does. That was the first sign. He came in, closed the door, set a manila envelope on my desk, didn't sit. Claire, we're restructuring the senior agent positions. We've made the decision to eliminate your role. Today will be your last day. Security can help with your belongings at noon. I stared at the envelope. I have to be honest, my first thought was not about the building. My first thought was, did I leave anything embarrassing in my desk drawer? I think I had a granola bar and some Advil and a lip balm I'd been looking for 3 weeks. My second thought was the Henderson account. $6.1 million. 8 months of work. He had moved it to Derek 3 days ago. I found out from the receptionist who felt bad about it and told me in the parking garage. So this wasn't restructuring. This was cleanup. Get rid of the person who knows too much about the numbers. Is this about Henderson? He straightened his jacket. This is a business decision. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. Okay. I picked up the envelope, put it in my bag, stood up, shook his hand, which genuinely confused him, I could tell, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity, Richard." He opened his mouth, closed it. I packed my desk in 38 minutes, hugged the receptionist whose name was Brianna and who absolutely did not deserve to work there, took the elevator down, walked to my car on the 3rd level of the parking garage, got in, sat there, took out my granola bar from my bag, took a bite, and called Thomas Waverly. "Thomas, 847 Commerce Street. Is that deed fully recorded?" "Signed, sealed, and recorded as of last Thursday, Claire. You own it." I chewed my granola bar. "Great! Let's send Richard Calloway his lease renewal notice first thing Monday morning." I gave it 2 weeks, not for drama, honestly because Thomas needed time to prepare the paperwork properly, and I needed time to figure out what I actually wanted the lease terms to be. I wasn't trying to destroy Richard's firm. I want to be clear about that. I raised the rate by 24%, which sounds aggressive until you know the building had been under market rate for 6 years because Gerald never raised it. 24% was fair. The Monday morning Thomas sent the letter, I was at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, looking at a listing for a 7th property in the short north. My phone rang at 11:17 a.m. Thomas. He called. What did he say? Is this some kind of joke? I set down my coffee. Transfer him through. 1 ring. I picked up. Hello, Richard. The silence on the other end of that phone, I cannot describe it exactly. It was the silence of a man recalculating everything he thought he knew about a situation. Claire, your Donovan Property Group. Not a question, a statement. Quiet. Careful. I am. You own our building. I do. Since the Thursday before you let me go, yes. He said nothing for a long moment. I waited. I'm good at waiting. I see. The lease terms are in Thomas's letter. I think you'll find them straightforward. Fair market value. Another pause. And if we choose not to renew? That's absolutely your prerogative, Richard. The letter outlines the standard 60-day notice period. He knew what moving a commercial real estate firm meant. The cost, the disruption, the client communication. He knew. I'll review the terms. Of course. Thomas is available if you have questions. Yes. Thank you, Ms. Donovan. Ms. Donovan. I hung up, sat in my kitchen, looked at my coffee, called my mom. She picked up on the first ring. Mom, remember when you said don't get ahead of yourself?
What did you do, Claire? I want to pause here because I need to know. When I told my mom, do you think she celebrated with me? Or do you think she said, "Claire Marie Donovan, what were you thinking?" Drop a 1 for celebrate or a 2 for lecture in the comments. Because her actual response was not what I expected from either option. She laughed. Not a small laugh, a real one. The kind that dissolves into silence and then starts again. Baby, your father is going to lose his mind when I tell him this. I started crying. Not sad crying. The specific kind of crying you do when something you work toward for a very long time finally arrives, and your body doesn't know what else to do with it. Mom, I did it the right way. I want you to know that. I know you did. No, like legally, ethically. I just built something they didn't know about. I know, baby. Okay. Are you eating? Moms. Derek called 3 days later, told me Richard had taken the Henderson commission and given Derek $800. $800 for a $6.1 million deal. I thanked him for telling me. He paused. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to open my own firm, Derek. Another pause. Can I apply? He was serious. He did apply. I didn't hire him immediately, but 6 months later, when Donovan Commercial Realty had enough volume, I did. Because Derek wasn't the problem, the system was. And I wasn't interested in punishing people for surviving inside a broken system. I was interested in building a better one. Richard renewed the lease, 24% increase, accepted without further negotiation. Brianna, the receptionist, came to work for me 4 months later. She was the first person I hired. She deserved it. She still works here. Here's the honest version of what I learned. Not the version that sounds wise in retrospect, the actual version. I did not have a master plan. I had a granola bar and a crack in my rear bumper, and a mom who told me not to get ahead of myself. I had a cousin who called about a listing in February when I had laundry to do. I almost didn't go. I almost stayed home. And I think about that more than anything else when people ask me how I did it. I went. That's it. I went when I didn't feel like it. I built when it was inconvenient. I stayed quiet when I wanted to scream. Not because I'm disciplined, because my mom cleaned offices at 2 a.m. and still packed my lunch, and I was not going to let that be for nothing. If you are somewhere right now being overlooked by someone who has already decided what you are worth, let them decide, and then go home and build something in the hours they don't know about. Not for revenge, for the same reason my mom packed that lunch, because some things are worth doing right, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. If this story sat with you today, you already know what to do. Next story is about a woman whose in-laws drove 4 hours to her front door with a lawyer and a quitclaim deed. They told her to sign her house away, or they would make things very difficult for her marriage. She asked for a pen, found one in her purse, and showed them that the name on that deed had never been her husband's to begin with. They drove 4 hours home in complete silence. I'll see you there.